Hi everyone, welcome back to Story of the World Chapter Highlights. I'm Sophie Teacher and this is Chapter 18 of your Story of the World 4 books. Now let's get started because there's lots of things to talk about today. So at the very start of our chapter today, we are in Persia. Now we've talked about Persia a lot before and previously in this book, so you might remember what was happening there. Persia used to be a really big empire, a really big kingdom. But as more and more wars happened and as more and more issues with leadership happened, it became smaller and smaller. Now, as it got smaller, both Russia and the British were interested in taking parts of Persia. Russia tended to do this by fighting. They would come into the north of Persia and fight for the land. The British argued that they used diplomacy. But basically, they asked the Shah, can we trade with you? Can we send British people in? And the Shah knew if he didn't agree, the British would also just fight them. So both the countries knew they were stronger than Persia and were using this to get things from Persia. Now, when the Shah died, his son, Muzaffar-ud-din Shah, became the new Shah. Now, he didn't really like his father very much, and they had lots of issues. And also, his father hadn't really taught him how to run a country. Once he realized how much debt Persia was in, he started to take drastic actions. Now, the first thing he did was that he started to sell areas of Persia. Specifically, there was an area where oil was known to be under the ground. Now, oil or petroleum, as you know it, was very important in the world at this time. As more and more ships and things started to run on oil, it started to become a really important commodity in the world. Now, Odin Shah sold some of this land to William Knox D'Arcy, who was British. And he knew if he drilled under the ground with these steel drills, he would be able to find oil. So he paid lots of money to the Shah for these areas, and that helped Persia a little bit. The second thing he did was he borrowed a lot of money from the British and the Russians, which he was already in between them a little bit, and they really wanted to take a lot of his land. So also borrowing lots of money for them gave them even more power in his country, which was a huge problem. Now, in 1906, Odin Shah decided to create a general assembly. He thought if we have an assembly, people can vote and people can have a real say, and there will be like a real government in Persia. Okay, so he decided to do this. Now, unfortunately, not long after, he ended up dying. And after he died, there was the dissolution of the area of Persia, okay? So there was a really big problem here, and Russia came in on the north, and they took this area, and the British came into the Gulf and took that area. The next person to go on the throne was Muhammad Ali Shah. Now, Muhammad Ali Shah didn't really like the idea of this assembly very much. He didn't want to be told what to do by a government, okay? So he got his bodyguards, the Persian Cossack Brigade, and they went into the General Assembly and they dissolved it. Now, this was all happening in 1908, okay? But when he did that, the people of Persia got angry. They thought, it's another Shah who's going to take lots of power from us. So they ended up rebelling against him. And this led to Muhammad Ali Shah fleeing the country. He left the country and went to Russia. And he even left his 11-year-old son behind. But after this, they managed to build up the assembly again with the help of Russia. Russia helped reform it and helped the young Shah as well. Now, not long after this man from before, William Knox D'Arcy, found oil. He drilled under the ground and he found oil in Persia. This was a huge deal, and he knew he could make lots of money from it. So he sold those areas to the British government. The British government were interested in the oil for their ships and all of these things they're starting to do with oil. Now, this company, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later became BP Oil. BP Oil is one of the richest companies in the world, still today in 2025. It's one of the richest companies, okay? Now, after this happened, okay, the government, so the assembly in Persia was like, we need money, we need help, we have no money. So they actually asked America for help. They asked the American president at the time, and he went, okay, I'll send over some bankers and we can see what we can do. But this really angered the Russians. The Russians were like, why are you asking for help from the Americans? So Russia yet again came down into Persia and essentially scared away the Americans. The Americans left, and Persia was basically left to, be the Russians. And the Russians oversaw what was going on in Persia at that time. Now, let's move on to the second part of our chapter today. So, the next part of our chapter is talking about the Balkan states. Now, we've talked about the Balkans a little bit before, but it's the area that used to be owned or colonized by the Ottoman Empire. And as time went on, so there was the Russian and Turkish War we already talked about from 1878. When this happened, a lot of this area started to become independent from Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire started to get smaller and smaller. This included Bulgaria. Now, Bulgaria, with the help of Russia, became an independent state. And that was a big deal. Bulgaria was quite a large country in this area. Now, because Bulgaria had had help from Russia and they were very close to Russia, other countries in Europe weren't very happy, such as France and the UK, and they thought we can't have a country that's aligning with Russia so much. So they said, okay, in the north, there can be Russians, so Russia can have the north, and let's give the south back to the Ottomans because we can control that a little better. So that is what happened. But the people of Bulgaria didn't want that. They already had their freedom. They didn't want to be taken over again. So they all decided to rebel so they could all become one country again. Now, the Russians weren't very happy with this and said, okay, good luck, you're on your own now. And they left, and Bulgaria became a free nation. Now, when a lot of these countries had become independent, one of the ones who hadn't was Macedonia, which is a country just next to Greece. Macedonia was still under the Ottoman Empire, and they wanted their own independence. So on August 2nd, 1903, we call it St. Elijah's Day Uprising. They decided to rebel against Ottoman rule. Unfortunately for them at this time, the leader of the Ottoman Empire, or the king, was Sultan Abdul Hamid. He was a very aggressive man, and he thought, I don't want any more uprising. I don't want any more war. So he just sent people in and killed people in Macedonia. Thousands and thousands of people were killed in this uprising, slaughtered. Now, in the past, maybe he could have got away with it more. But at this time, young Turkish people were getting more and more upset with the rule in their country. And they weren't happy about their sultan killing thousands of people in a country that was meant to be under their rule. So young Turkish people stood up and said, no, we're not happy with this. We want to get rid of the sultan. Okay, so that's what the young Turks did. They pushed out the sultan and he fled the country and they took power in the country. They decided they wanted the Ottoman Empire and Turkey to be more like a government system. So they did the proclamation for the Ottoman Empire. This meant that people over the age of 20 would be allowed to vote. It meant Christians and Muslims would be treated the same, would have the same rights. It meant also that they would become secular. Secular means not ruled by Islamic law or religious law. However, the Young Turks did have one thing they still wanted. They wanted everyone in the Balkan area to speak Turkish, everyone who was still under Ottoman rule. Now, as time went on, the Balkan states weren't happy with this. They got really, really angry, and they decided to rebel again against the Ottoman Empire. And this was the First Balkan War in 1912. You have Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro. Okay, 750,000 soldiers fought against the Ottoman Empire, and they all managed to get their independence, these states. Okay, now Macedonia was left out again. They were like, what about us? What do we do? Okay, now Macedonia was next to Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria. They all thought, what if we got a little part of Macedonia and broke it up? So Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria started the Second Balkan War, and they all wanted parts of Macedonia. However, Bulgaria turned against Serbia and Greece, who it was meant to be working with, and attacked both of them. Now, it didn't end very well for Bulgaria. Serbia and Greece got most parts of Macedonia, and Bulgaria only a little bit. But this caused some major issues between the Balkan states. Bulgaria, now hated by Serbia, started to get closer to Austria this time. And Serbia wasn't happy about this. Serbia really hated Bulgaria, so now they really hated Austria too. Now, you might see this as becoming something that could be like the Third Balkan War, right? But unfortunately, what happened was a young Serbian man ended up killing the heir to the Austrian throne as his motor car went through the city. And he shot and killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand. In anger of this relationship, Bulgaria and Austria. Now, it didn't lead to the Third Balkan War. This ended up leading to the start of World War I.